We'll begin episode 1 for season 2 in just a minute, but first let's start with the date. It's May 29th of 1987. So the story begins in the upstairs bedroom of Starlight Mansion with Chrissy of the Starlight Girls and Sheena of the Holograms. That was until suddenly Annie of the Starlight Girls comes upstairs to let Shayna know that it's time for band practice. So Shayna agrees to go downstairs. By the time that she did, what Shayna did was to apologize to her bandmates for being late. Just when band practice was about to begin, that's when Anthony shows up to have some news for Shayna. He said that there's a woman that she wanted to meet and she's interested in Shayna's design, Liz Stratton. Although Shayna was not exactly sure she's good enough for Liz, even though she's never met her. Then Anthony told her that there's a bigger problem because Liz, within the last few weeks, has fired her last designer, so he suggested for Sheena to gather her designs and go meet up with Liz. So after the girls heard this news, that's when they encouraged her with a lot of support that she needs. So both Anthony and Shayna head to the Stratton house. Meanwhile, the holograms became depressed, but Jericho tells them to cheer up that it's Shayna's big chance to be a designer for a change. So now it's up to Jericho and her friends to find a new bandmate. So meanwhile, at the Stratton house, by the time that Anthony and Shayna arrived, that's when they met up with Liz. And that's when Liz told Anthony to hire Shayna right away. At first, Liz seems impressed with Shayna's designs and asked Shayna if she would come by at her house a little bit later. But then Shayna says that she's very occupied with a band right now, but Liz makes the threat clear to Shayna to come on Liz's terms and not hers. So Shayna and Anthony head back to the Starlight Mansion, but on the way there, Shayna sensed that there's something off with Liz and she couldn't figure out why. So by the time they arrived at the mansion, Anthony agrees to pick up Shayna a little bit later. Meanwhile, inside, Shayna just told the girls the good news. So even though the girls are amazed to hear this news, but now Shayna says that she's not so sure. And who's going to be playing the drums? Is what Shayna's asking Jericho, since with the tour coming up, it's going to be a problem. So when Anthony came by later to pick up Sheena, that's when Jericho said not to worry, that she'll put on a talent search. And just like they did before, Sheena and Anthony head to the Stratton house. So on the way there, Anthony tried to be as supportive as he could be to Sheena after she told him that the band doesn't love her anymore, but he tells her that's just not the case. They wanted what's best for her. Back inside, the rest of the Hawkers are feeling depressed and that they miss Shana. But Jericho said that they had no choice but to go on with the talent search, even if they had to post every advertisement there was, and so she did. On May 30th of 1987, that's exactly what she did in her upstairs office, along with a little help from the Starlight Girls on the way. Also here in the news about the talent search are Eric and the Misfits. So Eric made a suggestion that he and the Mistress will find a new bandmate, even if it meant they had to look at every club in the area. So even though Possess and Roxy doesn't agree with this idea, but the only person that does is Stormer. So everyone left. So later that night, that's what Eric and the Misfits did. They went to every nightclub in the area, but no luck. But that was until when Stormer looked at the poster that the Tinkerbellies are performing, that's when she heard the sound of a saxophone that's coming from nearby. So Eric and the Misfits decide to follow Stormer from the sound of the saxophone that's coming from at the Tinkerbellies concert. The audience was booing at someone that was on the stage, and that someone was Sheila Burns, aka Jetta. Now you can tell that Jetta has some serious saxophone skills. So when the Mistress came on stage to join up with her, that's when Pizzazz of the Mistress was asking Jetta, "Are you sure you're willing to keep up with us?" Well, as you may have guessed it, Jetta went ahead and gave it her all. So the Misfits joined up with a little saxophone solo with their song, "I Like Your Style." So after the song came to an end, that's when Roxy and Jetta began having a fight. So now it's up to Eric to break it up. So that's when Eric found out that Jetta was an illegal immigrant because she'd just been thrown out of the country. But now Eric's getting worried that if immigration found out about it, that Jetta's in serious trouble. But then Pizzazz had a suggestion to make Jetta a legal eagle. So she told Jetta, Pizzazz that is, that her father's lawyers can talk to the immigration. So Jetta likes Pizzazz's idea. Later, Aja of the hologram stopped by at the music store where Barry works, and that's when she heard the sound of drums nearby. In the back, that's when she met up with Craig Phillips, who was drumming there. At first, Craig declined to join up the audition, but As you may have guessed it, he'll later change his mind. So the next morning on May 31st of 1987 at the Alonso residence, Miguel, who was the father of four, just heard the news from one of his sons that there's an audition going on at Starlight Music on the second floor. So both of the men head toward the garage where playing the drums is Carmen Alonso, aka Raya. So by the time that both Raya's father and her brother arrived, they told her about this audition at Starlight Music. But Raya is not so sure she's good enough for them. But thanks to her parents and of course her brother's support, Rhea wasted no time to head to Starlight Music where there's an audition going on. So the very next morning on June 1st of 1907 is also Jericho's 21st birthday. The audition went as planned, but unfortunately none of the drummers were good enough. So while that's going on, by the time that Rhea arrived, all she finds was a big long line. So that's a big long wait. So now discouraged and ashamed, she went back to the residence. Meanwhile, back at the Stratton house, Liz got upset with Shana and told her that the designs were all wrong and then asked her to do it over. By the time that Liz left the room, Shana was annoyed and upset. So when Anthony shows up minutes later, she told him that maybe leaving the band wasn't such a good idea. But he tells her, although being supportive and optimistic as he is, tells her that there was nothing he could do about it, but he tried to be as supportive as he could. Back at the Alonso residence, Rhea just told her father the bad news. But again, Miguel, who's Rhea's father, being supportive as he is, told Rhea that she shouldn't quit. So while there's still time, he suggested that both of them should head to Starlight Music right away. So that's what they did. But by the time that Rhea and her father arrived, they saw that the audition was already over. But aha, Miguel has a plan to sneak her in. And by how, you may ask? By using his potted plants. So by the time that both Miguel and his daughter head inside, they talk to the guard. And the guard tells them that Jim's on the second floor. So meanwhile, on the second floor, the audition didn't go so well. That was until the Alonso showed up and Miguel introduces his daughter Rhea to Jim and asks Jim if Rhea can get a chance to audition. And so Jim agrees. So Rhea went ahead and gave it her all, and with the rest of the bandmates joining in, they did the song Believe in Yourself by the Holograms. So after the song ended, Asha seemed impressed and so was Kimber, and then asked Rhea if she would come back the following week, and so Rhea agrees. But on the Alonso's way out, Miguel discovered that he had forgot his potted orchids that he left behind. But Rhea told him not to worry, that she should get them. But before she did so, she was about to be a witness of something else, Jim changing into Jerga. And when Rhea saw it, she was in shock. So Asha told Jerga that she should be careful who she reveals her secret to, and that's when Synergy appears. First of all, to apologize for the interruption and warns Jerga that if the secret should ever fall in the wrong hands, it could mean a serious problem. But Jerga assures Synergy in order to gain the bandmate's trust, she must do so in order to keep the secret safe. But she was unaware that Rhea was previously a witness. After Rhea saw what happened, she runs to the elevator to join her father. But then when Jim saw that there are potted orchids that were left behind by Rhea's father, she runs to catch up with them and return the potted orchids to the Alonsos in the elevator. So after that, the Alonsos left. So the next morning is June the 2nd of 1987. Back at Starlight Music's second floor, it's now Craig's turn to be the first male drummer in history to be with the Holograms, and with their song I Got My Eye on You, sung last season. Later that afternoon, when there's a party going on at Starlight Mansion's backyard, everyone, including the Starlight Girls, are having a good time except for Ray, who's just been insulted by one of Big Babe's bandmates, so it's up to the Holograms to escort her out. Back with Rhea, who was upset by an insult, that's when Jim tries to cheer her up by saying it's the talent that counts. Meanwhile, the Starlight Girls are busy banging a pinata, and of course, it was Bonnie who broke it. Of course, Rhea explains that how she and her family were originally from Mexico, and she's the only girl of the family who made this pinata, and Kimber thanked her for it. Then Craig, who overheard a guest insulting Rhea, he was more honorable enough to defend her. So even though Asha was not aware that he's the brother of Stormer, aka Mary Phillips, but she seems impressed with it. Meanwhile, the Misfits were having a press conference to introduce the new member of the band, Sheila, aka Jetta. At the same time, Jim has her press conference to announce that there's going to be a drumming contest at the Starlight Auditorium the following week. And here's the best part, the audience is allowed to vote on who's going to be the next drummer, Rhea or Craig. Back at Eric's upstairs office at Misfits Music, Pizzazz of the Misfits doesn't seem to be amused with them being on page 8 and the drumming contest being on the front page. So when Rossi must have suspected it must be somebody else's relative competing against Rhea, that's when Stormer, when she heard about it, ran off. After Stormer ran off, neither Eric nor the Misfits were aware of what was going on with Stormer lately. But as manipulative as he can be, Eric, as always, has a plan to go through someone, and that someone had to be Rhea. So later that night at the Japanese restaurant, that's when Eric met up with Rhea. So, as you may have guessed it, Eric just told Rhea that he can make her as rich and famous as she can be than other bandmates. But there's only one condition. Eric told Rhea that she must do him one simple favor, is just to find out who Jim really is. And now poor Rhea's in a serious situation, and now she's left with a choice, either to trust Jim or betray her. So that ends episode 1 in part 1.